can't fight, I can't breathe without my brother. We come from peace, we can't be beating on each other. I need peace. Love from my hood. I put my part. Have faith in my hood. We only relate to the same things. How can we focus and maintain? We point our fingers and place blame. Society's just trying to bring us down. Rob us of culture and shut us down. We fight for a change and let's get it now. Win it now, present it now. Tell me what's next. Tell me what's new. I break it down. It's up to you. Corrupted the kings. We are still breaking every chain. Facing the pain. Losing brothers on a day-to-day. But this gotta change. Break the locks of the cage. We will not suffer. I can't fight, I can't breathe without my brother. We come from peace, we can't be beating on each other. Harmonize hatred, look at all the time being wasted. Our skin is sensation, build love all around the nation. Key is just patience, even faith, love, and relations. Distance is the only thing that can break us. Don't settle for less, we're being held in the press. Making our way to the crest, it's time to invest into each other for unity, building a better community. These are the colors that's true to me. This isn't new to me. I need my sisters and I need my mothers and I can't fight, I can't breathe without my brother. We come from peace, we can't be beating on each other. We ain't gon' be nothing. That's why I heard them say they wanna keep it from us. Our history, our way, our misery, our pain.
Hey.
All right. Hi, everybody. Chris says we're live, so I'll believe him. Welcome to the May book talk here with the Boston Public Library Teen Services team. Today we're going to be talking about Sara Farizan's young adult novel Here to Stay, which is about Bijan, our main character, who is been called up from the JV basketball team to play for the varsity basketball team after he saved everybody in this one game at the beginning of the year. And as a result of that, a photoshopped image of him as a stereotypical Middle Eastern terrorist goes around the school and kind of alters the junior year he was expecting to have. Along the way, he makes lots of friends, which is my favorite part, and Jackie and Laura don't care about it all, but I will be talking about it incessantly. And as he tries to figure out who he is, who his friends are, and what his identity means to him. So without further ado, I'm Allie. I am the Children and Youth Services Librarian at the Brighton branch of the Boston Public Library. I'm going to kick it to Laura.
I'm Laura. I am a teen librarian at the Central branch of the Boston Public Library in Copley.
And Jackie.
And I am Jackie. I am the youth librarian at the Adams Street branch.
Wonderful. All right, and we are coming here. We are live with you today until about 4 o'clock talking about this book. We do invite you to please join in the comments. I'm going to vaguely look at them, so please, let us know. Chris can always double check if we're not seeing stuff. I'm sure he'll let us know. But yeah, we're going to kind of jump right into it. So Chris, you can hit that slide button. The first thing we're going to talk about this book is the discrimination theme that kind of is throughout the entire novel. It kind of, shapes how the book goes. So our first quote, Chris, if you could bring it up, is, "But my name isn't Marty or Daniel or Seth. My name is Bijan, and the world won't let me be the hero in my own damn life." Laura, I know you picked this quote. I also picked this quote. So if you want to start, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so this was pretty early in the book, and it just really struck out to me as really capturing what this book was going to be about, and also just the importance of representation in media, because Bijan is talking about all these different white male heroes from popular movies, and they all have these very stereotypical like a 1950s American white family boy names, and that he just has never seen like a teenager with his name or a name like his name represented as the hero in one of these stories, and that kind of like translates into his own life of it's hard to see yourself as something if you don't have any examples given to you.
Yeah, I think this quote for me really, like you said, kind of sums up the entire theme of the book at the end of the day. So I believe we get this quote shortly after Bijan basically wins his team the basketball game. He subs in for somebody and he just like comes out of nowhere. He's a star. He's so incredible. Also, apparently he like is canonically 6'4". Ask me how tiny I was picturing him before they told me he was 6'4", way too late in the book. He was small, and then they were like, yeah, but I'm like 6'4", and I was like, he's like, what?
And you were on JV?
Like, he can touch it. He can touch it, I imagine.
Because I never saw that he was 6'4", so when I read that he dunked the ball, I was like,
yeah,
oh.
no, at some point it mentions that he's 6'4" because he's like looking at somebody else who's, I don't know, whatever. He's 6'4", wild. But I think, he comes in and he saves the day with this basketball game. And then like 2 days later, the whole school sees this photoshopped photo of him implying that he's like a terrorist simply because he is of Middle Eastern descent. And it is kind of like that, right? Like he was the school hero and he wasn't even allowed that because of the perceptions around the color of his skin and his parents' nationality.
Yep.
Chris, I think you can probably take us to the next slide because we're going to get into a little bit more about the discrimination and how Bijan talks about his classmates and himself. So this is the part where I'm supposed to use food metaphors to describe everyone's respective complexions. It makes me cringe a little the way all the books we read in English class describe people's skin color using food metaphors. He's right, and he should say it.
Yup.
At one point he does, but he's like, oh, like, I guess I would say, like, somebody would say I'm olive skinned, but olives are green. So, like, what does that mean? And I was like, Bijan, go off. Correct.
Yep. Yeah.
I think this book was really good about identifying for us which of Bijan's, like, friends and allies were people of color and which ones were not without using food metaphors. Without making it, I don't know how to describe it, but like it wasn't like we like hovered over descriptions of people. Sometimes Bijan would just like drop a fact and walk, and I was just like, oh, okay, like that, okay, totally shifts my perspective on this character. Like we knew Marcus was a person of color for a while, but it wasn't until halfway through the book when Marcus was like said something about being black that I was like, okay, so Marcus is black. Like we didn't get a whole lot of the description. I didn't know the races of anybody in this book until Bijan was like, oh, these white friends of mine are acting up again, and like things like that, which I appreciated. So
yeah, for sure, because these food metaphors, they're always used for people of color or marginalized people, and they are never used for like white Europeans. So
you get like porcelain and ivory, like
yeah,
and even that is typically like, Eastern Asian coded.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I mean, I look like a ghost. Look at this, I am translucent. But because we so often default to like white as the default when we're reading, unfortunately for a lot of people, they wouldn't even bother to describe me because it would just be assumed I was haunting this library with my ghostly pale skin. It won't get better during the summer, folks, either. This is just what it is. We can probably go ahead to the next slide. Reads, but something had shifted when that image appeared on my screen, and Bijan in this case is talking about the photoshopped image of him as a terrorist. Since that moment, I had felt the weight of somebody else's living, throbbing, unimaginative hatred on my body. Laura, this was your quote.
I did like this line.
Talk about it, and then Jackie, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah. I think this really just pointed out how he dealt with definitely some microaggressions and smaller instances of discrimination in his life, but this seems like it was the first time that he was really hit with just the like horrific outright racism and just how heavy that weighed on him, even though it really has nothing to do with him, but he's the one who's being negatively affected by the hatred, I don't know, it just felt like a really powerful way to describe that.
Yeah. I think there is like a huge difference between the anger that you feel when like you see, the racism that we see on the news and everything, and the anger that you feel when it's something that is specifically targeted at you. It's just like a different kind of flavor that like hits different.
Yeah, we didn't put any of the quotes in, but Bijan's mom, he lives with his mom, who her parents are Iranian, and then she grew up in Southern California and moved to Boston. And then dad, who has passed away, was from Jordan. And so we see mom gets to have the anger in a lot of cases. I think there is a quote somewhere in here talking about like when mom starts talking about cultural pride, but we do see there's a scene where mom is like putting together this letter writing campaign with other parents to be like, this is unacceptable, which she's correct. But Bijan's like, I don't want to be the poster kid for cyberbullying. And she's just like, this is bigger than you. And I understand that you need to process in your own way, but this is bigger than you and this has to happen. And I would appreciate it if you joined in. And so for Bijan, he never asked to be the poster child for cyberbullying, and he didn't ask to have his junior year complicated by having to defend his existence to people.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the things this book actually did really well. Like there is like striking that balance between those two things.
We disagree about the overall feelings about this book.
But yeah, you feel bad for Bijan because like you remember going through high school and like all you want to do is like be as like unobtrusive and like go through the hallways without anyone noticing you, and he doesn't get this option.
Like he doesn't even get noticed for his good things, like how good he is at basketball and stuff like that. He gets to live like that for like 3 seconds, and then this ruins it. Like, also, I knew immediately who it was.
Yep,
I didn't like them from the start.
I thought it was very interesting that this wasn't a sports context because I think, particularly in America and the United States, we tend to see a lot of like people who are very racist, people who are racist internally and don't really recognize their racism, whatever like part of the spectrum of racism they fall on, that they will accept people of color when they are star athletes in a way that they will not accept them in other facets of life. So I just thought it was interesting, to see it in the sports thing and that not applying here.
Chris, could you jump forward 2 slides? There's a quote that I think works perfectly.
Did I jump ahead?
Nope, that's okay. It came up organically. That's what this is all about, Laura. But there is a point in the book, this was a quote I pulled, where Marcus says to Bijan, go easy on that hand. We're going to need you to win that New England championship in the next 2 games. Excellence shuts everyone up real quick. And it's this idea, right, that Laura was saying, that while you're performing well and doing a good job, you're part of the team. And the minute you falter, you're like, when you are doing well, you are an American. And when you're doing poorly, you are the other part of your identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know Jackie can maybe probably speak to this too, but I know we both watch hockey, and this is something you see a lot in hockey where if a player is Black or Asian, they will immediately get branded as being trouble if they don't get along with a coach, or if they speak out, or if they're just like not playing as well. But you will have white players who are like spouting racism on Twitter, getting into fistfights with their teammates, and they keep getting chance after chance. You know exactly what I'm talking about. So this really is so real, unfortunately.
And it's funny because the way the book, it's not funny, but like the way the book addresses this, and something I really liked about the book is at one point they're like talking about who their favorite basketball players are. And they're talking about like a basketball player from pre 1950. And somebody says that you only think that because there were no Black players yet. Like, of course you think he was the best one. Like, and it's just like it's more organic, and it feels more like how conversations actually go when they were interlacing these conversations. I'm jumping really far ahead because Laura put in a whole quote so we could talk about this, and I'm like, let's skip to like section 6, quote 42. Like,
Don't worry, I can do my other basketball talk later when we get to that quote because it's kind of different.
Yeah, and I definitely want to revisit this because when we talk about the final basketball game, I definitely want to talk about what happens there.
Yeah.
Chris, if you don't mind, I'm going back a slide. Let's take us back to the quote that starts with, Stephanie stood up in the front row and looked at me like I was some almost extinct breed of tiger in a Save the Wildlife commercial. I could practically hear sad music playing in the background. I hated that. I didn't want to be pitied. Laura really wants to talk about Stephanie. Go ahead.
Stephanie was a truly wild character. The way this girl talks, I have never in my life as a teenager or an adult met a teenager who talks like this girl. She is so formal, but I don't even know how to describe how Stephanie communicates. But she's also just like such a peak example of just like a white girl trying her best and just not quite getting it right. And I think this is a really good example of that. I think Stephanie is someone who thinks of herself as being very accepting and not being racist or not having discriminations that she holds. But then when this happens to Bijan, she kind of sees him as just someone to be pitied. And I don't know, I feel like in a way it's kind of like dehumanizing of like, let me feel so bad for you and what you're going through in a way that is, I do feel bad, but is also kind of like disingenuous in a way. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like several times during the book, Bijan like just came out and said, no one is asking me how I feel about this. They're just like making decisions for me without even talking to me. Yeah, so I think Stephanie, while she means well for most of the book, like she falls into this trap really easily.
Yeah, Stephanie's definitely like a fixer, where she like has never met a problem she couldn't fix, or never met an issue she wasn't willing to elevate to a level at which people have to pay attention. So Stephanie is super socially conscious to the best of her like 16-year-old ability. And I do have to remind myself she's 16. What did I know at 16? Absolutely nothing. A head empty. But you know, she's the leader of the committee to get the school mascot changed because it's like a colonial soldier with a gun, and she's like, that's dumb, we should change it. And she's right. She loves to save the whales. She wants to turn Bijan into like the poster child for anti-bullying. Like, and again, while I think her intentions were good, we have to always think about intention versus impact. And Bijan was actually really good at calling her out and being like, hey, what you're doing, like she was quoted in the school newspaper talking about it, and he was like, you didn't even tell me they asked. Like, you didn't tell me they were running the story. You didn't tell me you gave a quote. Like, we're supposed to be friends. And so I think, Jackie, I think you're the one who said it, she falls into this trap of like trying to fix something because she knows best. And so much of that is still rooted in white privilege and centering whiteness in the conversation. All
For
right.
sure.
Chris, you can go ahead. I think you'll have to skip one, and we're going to head to the slide that says maybe. Well, so Bijan's mom at one point says this to him. Maybe I didn't give you enough pride in where your family comes from. Both of your parents are from cradles of civilizations. Thousands of years of culture on both your father's side and mine.
It was really interesting to me, like throughout the book, because I think we only get, if I remember, like 2 instances where we find out about Bijan's culture. The one is when mom comes to the school and they are speaking in Farsi. Or she's speaking to him in Farsi because he says that he can understand it, but he doesn't really speak it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, towards the end, when he's talking about after he made that speech at the assembly, and he was like, I could have mentioned all of these things about like the racism that he and people like him meet every day, but like we don't really get anything else, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying with this speech, because when he's giving that speech, the reader gets an internal monologue at the same time about all the things he doesn't feel necessary to explain to his classmates, like the geopolitical happenings in these countries that they could just like google.com is free, and like, you know, telling apart different countries, like how people don't know the difference between Iran and Iraq, or like no North African countries exist and things like that. But we don't get a whole lot from him about having engaged with that or having that feel like part of his identity.
Right.
So maybe we're supposed to operate under the assumption that he's been living like this for so long that he doesn't even recognize that it is something he knows until he's confronted with other people not knowing it.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good point. All right, we can pop to the next slide, which I believe is from the internal monologue in that speech. I might be wrong. But to the kids at Granger, I looked like an extra for Claire Danes to chase down in some alley for information. To them, I looked like a kid Bradley Cooper would have in the crosshairs of his gun. To them, I looked like I didn't belong at their school. They didn't know the difference between any of the Middle Eastern, South Asian, or North African countries. They didn't know anything about the different culture, languages, or histories, and honestly, it felt like they didn't want to know.
Yeah, I think that's from that part.
Yeah. I thought this just really using those examples, which I guess maybe now are already outdated examples.
Homeland and American Sniper, right?
Yeah. But I think it just really hits home how these kids that he's going to school with, they don't know anything outside of their bubble. And also just that our education system is failing us in terms of really teaching people about the realities of the entire world.
I didn't do geography. I didn't know where the American states were until I figured it out on the back of a Southwest Airlines napkin when I was like 13.
Wow.
I mean, like, how many years of American history did you all have over any other kind of history?
And then world history was really always just ancient history, right? So, like, we didn't learn anything about modern day Iran, modern day Iraq, but like, or the geopolitical happenings that like informed our current events, or like how we got to this point. Like, and I feel like that's, you know, we're seeing that play out in real time right now, with like conflicts around the globe where we don't have the historical perspective we should, because our history classes in a lot of ways failed us, at least American ones. I will say, for like background and context for those of you who haven't gotten a chance to read the book yet, Bijan goes to a private fancy pants school in Massachusetts, Boston specifically. I think it is Boston. And he is on an academic scholarship, and it is touched on a few times. Like, a kid on his basketball team is there on an athletic scholarship, but many of his classmates are rich and white and come from generational wealth. So there's also that kind of barrier for him. But at the same time, he is also in a position of privilege, the kind that money gives you. Mom's a dentist. She's a well-respected doctor. And she is in enough of a position of power that she can speak up on behalf of her son. And for a lot of Black and brown parents, they can't. Like, and even Bijan's mom, like, is careful to not be like a difficult parent, even when she's defending her son. And the fact that she even takes it and escalates it as far as she can is also like a privilege that money gives her that another Black or brown family might not have the opportunity.
Yeah. That scene, that part where like Bijan could see his mom like calming herself down so she didn't seem like a hysterical person, a hysterical woman, like got it.
Yeah. So I think Farizan did a really good job of putting the microaggressions in for us too, like, because you could feel Bijan being frustrated, but I, as like a reader, was also frustrated because I was like, it just like shouldn't be like this. And that's just where we are. Kind of talking about money a little bit. We can go to the next slide, which has the quote, "Coach didn't defend Drew, who is a kid on the basketball team. He's there on an athletic scholarship. No one did. What was wrong with having a job? Will Thompson, who is garbage, got to act like a jerk because his family paid for the privilege. So Will Thompson is a legacy kid at this school. His grandfather's on the board. They throw buckets of money at the school. And because of that, Will kind of can do whatever he wants and doesn't get in trouble. And like, he's on the basketball team and he's not even good at basketball. Like, all of this stuff. And he's making fun of Drew in this moment for having a job.
Coach
is the worst.
Not a good coach.
No, not at all. He doesn't defend his players against his other players. He makes everybody in an altercation appear equally guilty. Like, Drew and Will were like doing racism towards Bijan, and Coach was like, can't we all just get along? Let's all shake hands and say sorry. Why should Bijan say sorry? Mind your business. He also, like, he was just not great. He was a bad grown-up.
Yes.
Can we all just agree the only good grown-up in this whole book was the guidance counselor? And like in the school.
And his mom.
Bijan's mom was rad.
Yeah.
And so is Sean's two moms.
Oh, yeah.
But as far as teachers go, they were all bad except the guidance counselor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the fact that Bijan was like, I don't think that this coach is like the way that he's speaking about his other players, like, what is he going to be saying about me, you know, to other people? Like, having that realization about an adult when you're a teenager is like mind-boggling.
So he like said, he was like, oh yeah, well, Drew's here on athletic scholarship. Like, I don't have to tell people's financial situation.
Nope.
Like, also, like, he was so mean to Drew. And like, listen, I'm not saying Drew didn't deserve it. He was acting up. But like, as an adult, you shouldn't be saying stuff like that in front of other students, regardless of your relationship with that student.
Right.
Yeah.
Coach is bad. We're going to get into it a little bit more later, but Coach is bad. Speaking of adults who aren't great, on the next slide, we have Mrs. Mcrae. Miss Mcrae, whatever her name was, the history teacher, who also seems like she's only doing an okay job at teaching history. As usual, she had an optimistic outlook with no concrete evidence to back up her vision.
This was just so real. I think we've all encountered many people like this, and it is so frustrating when people are just like, oh, here's what's going to happen, and it's going to be great, but they give you no details. They give you like no evidence that it's all gonna work out great, and it's so frustrating.
throughout the book, she was very much like, every time they would meet with like Bijan's mom, she'd be like, we're gonna fix this. There's not gonna be racism anymore. And they would be like, how? And she would be like, we're gonna do an assembly.
We all know assemblies fix everything.
Yep. Oh my god, and then that like exercise or that discussion that they did in the class that like completely ran away with her, and she was like shocked that talking about something,
The internment camp.
yeah.
And like one of the kids, listen, Sean was right and he should say it. Sean was right. Jessica was wrong. She was like, well, if the government thinks you might be a threat, they should be able to steal your civil liberties. And Sean was like, why don't you read a book and also shut up? And I was like, Sean. And Miss Mcrae was just like, kids, this discussion is getting a little heated. Ma'am,
Jessica.
you are the adult. Sean even called her out, which I was really proud of him. I really love the peripheral characters in this book. I love them. But Sean even called her out, and he was like, you're just gonna like let her say these things and like not say like, no, actually internment camps were bad. End of discussion. Like no ifs, ands, buts. And you know, she was big peak capital W, capital F white feminism for me.
I think it also kind of plays into this idea of libraries and neutrality and teachers and neutrality, and the idea of letting racism, homophobia, sexism, ableism, transphobia, any of those things, letting them stand is not really being neutral because it's implicitly giving value to what those people are saying. So I just thought it was an interesting little peek into our profession.
Yeah. I mean, if you are neutral when there is oppression, you are on the side of the oppressor. That is just by default. Like,
true.
All right, let's move on to another really lighthearted and fun topic. Let's talk about grief. Chris, you can take us right to the slide with the first quote. I knew she was right, but it also hurt that she wouldn't let me process this in my own time. And this is Bijan talking about his mom starting the letter writing campaign. Laura, I think this was one of your quotes as well. They're all quotes except for like 3 of them. So,
I just thought this was interesting because I think no matter what your age is, this is something you can really relate to, where like, you know, processing something that like doing XYZ is going to help it, but you also really just need to take the time to like get set with your emotions and figure it out for yourself in your head. So this idea of like knowing that writing letters and fighting back against this really horrific online bullying was the right thing to do, but that he's also just not quite ready for that, and he's frustrated that all these adults are kind of trying to force it to happen now, even though he knows it's right. That feels very relatable. So this was just something that struck out to me as like a nice, true little section.
I feel like it showed how mature Bijan actually is, because to realize that your parent is right when you don't want them to be right, like, I still have issues with that.
Yeah.
And I think also the frustration level of when you are the type of person who is mature enough to recognize that, it makes it even harder to process, because you can just like talk yourself out of or into whatever and be like, no, I understand why I'm feeling like this, so I don't really need to process it.
I like to call it therapy 202 instead of therapy 101, where you've done some of the work. So like, you don't need to identify what the problem is. You need somebody to like come in and like start telling you how to fix it. You know what the problem is. You've mentally done that, but you don't know how to deal with it. And so I think Bijan, you know, is in 202. Like, he understands why he's upset and why he's frustrated, but it doesn't change the fact that he doesn't get to process this how he wants. So what does he do? All right, we can go to the next slide, which is in the same theme. People have different ways of coping, but I don't think my mom and I have figured out how to cope together. This line, it is talking about the grief they both felt when his father died. Bijan's father died unexpectedly of a brain aneurysm. And it was one of the only times he ever saw his mom like yell at somebody was when she was telling the doctors there was no way her husband could have died. But Bijan's mom doesn't talk about his dad very much. Bijan has to ask, and she's not very forthcoming because she's sitting so much in her own grief. And they haven't figured out a way for their grief to like coexist in a way that is helpful and productive for both of them. And it was really sad. And I think it was just a wonderful use of words and language to describe the relationship they found themselves in for how heartbreaking that relationship is.
Yeah, I think this is a really common dynamic, not just like parent-child, but in any kind of close relationship where some people, if they are grieving, they want to talk about it and sharing memories helps them. And some people need to kind of just like shut it down so that they can deal with things internally on their own time. And when you have two people who love each other but are on opposite sides of that, it can be really, really hard for both of them. So I just thought this again was like a very real and very well put. And yeah, sad.
Yeah. Jackie, if you don't have anything to particularly add to that, we can move on to our actual lighthearted and fun section. All right, so we're going to move on to our basketball/friendship section. Laura put this in the outline as basketball, and I had to go in and add /friendship because there's so much friendship in this book, and we need to talk about it.
There is a lot of friendship.
Yes, it's so cute. It's so cute. So the first slide with the quote says, "We won in part because of me again, because I did what I was supposed to do. It didn't change anything." This doesn't have anything to do with friendship. This is about basketball. So
yes,
all you, Laura.
Oh, I mean, I think this really just speaks again to this idea of they will only ever see him as different and he's there to help them win for now. And if he ever stops helping them win, they have no loyalty to him. And he was really, I think, expecting when he finally got to prove himself on the court that would like change everything. And time again, he is helping his team to really make this run. And he is not getting the hero's reception that he would if he was a 6'4" white kid on the team.
Yeah, there is a quote towards the end of the book when he's talking to Drew where Drew like admits he was like, "We wouldn't have even made it to playoffs without you." And so to know that you carried such weight and you were basically single-handedly responsible for this success, and then it didn't change anything about how anybody saw you because of the color of your skin.
Yeah, I think this... Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay. The way that this book talks about like social cap, especially for characters who are of color, like there's the whole petition where they're trying to change the mascot, and every time they got like Marcus's name on there, they got Elle to help out, like their names and like their popularity like meant something more to what they were doing. It's not just like because they're good people who like believe in changing something like this.
I do think it's a little bit the like parallel existence, right, of Marcus and Bijan. They kind of do the same thing. They carry the basketball team. They're both like young boys of color. And at one point, Marcus does say to him, like, "Oh, did your mom give you one of those talks when you were a kid?" In reference to Marcus doesn't walk alone at night wearing a hoodie, and Bijan doesn't read anything in Arabic in public. He doesn't read Arabic, but like that was the conversation he had with Marcus. And it's interesting to see the way that they turn on Bijan. And I think there is this level to Marcus's character where he knows that it could have been. You know, like
sure.
and I feel like that's why Marcus becomes such a solid ally for Bijan, is because he knows that if he stopped winning basketball games and if he stopped being well liked by his classmates, this would also be what happened to him, because his classmates see the color of his skin before they see it.
Yeah. I thought it was also very interesting how I think it's pretty accepted in sports that a toxic locker room environment makes it very hard to win games, but this kind of points out how you can have a very like micro to medium aggression type vibe going on in the locker room, and the players who are being targeted by that feel like they just have to put up with it. So even though it is like by definition a toxic environment, because like Marcus and Bijan have been kind of socialized to just be like, this is what it's going to be like here, and it doesn't affect their winning, even though it really should, because they should not have to feel like they have to be okay with this. I don't know.
Was it after like the bacon in the locker incident where like Bijan, like his whole like internal monologue was like, I just need to like play basketball and I just need to play hard and be good and win the game. Like at no point did he get a chance to talk about or like feel the trauma of that experience. He just had to go play basketball because that's what it was expected of him.
And I think this does tie back, Jackie, to your point about social capital and everything. Like Marcus knew that he would lose his social capital if he wasn't playing well. And Bijan kind of sees the same thing happen. He's finally doing everything he should have to do to become what he says at one point, the big man on campus. And it doesn't matter. Like his social capital is so tarnished by the bigotry and racism that's running through his school. And I feel like, you know, with Marcus, we see that same thing. Like he has his social capital, but he never misbehaves. Like he never does anything to like kind of upset his classmates, and he's like very mild mannered, and that might just be his personality, but it also does feel a little bit like socialization to continue having that social capital.
Like at one point, I think it was the coach that said something terribly insulting, which is like everything that he said. But like Marcus just like repeated what he said kind of like sarcastically. And that's like, that is the minute, like that's all he can do without like crossing a line that is going to get him in trouble.
Yeah, especially because he was like getting scouted by colleges and stuff, and he needed coach's approval and he needed letters of recommendation. And we know, you know, historically how easy it is for specifically Black and brown men to be labeled as difficult or aggressive. And so Marcus couldn't be any of those things if he wanted a chance at like living his dream. And we see that with Bijan. Like Drew says at one point, like, you wouldn't get in as much trouble if you didn't run your mouth. And Bijan was like, and nobody else would have me running my mouth if they weren't so racist. And it's kind of like, you know, Marcus seems like he picks his battles, and then my little guy Bijan is just like, I'll fight them all. Let's go. Absolutely, throw down with me right now. Which is funny because with the email, he doesn't really want to deal with it, but then every other time there's a microaggression, Bijan's like, square up. Yep. I could take you. I'm 6'4".
Also, I love that it wasn't just like when it was microaggressions against him, like. He immediately went to stand up for Stephanie.
And like, Aaron and everybody,
So good.
All right, I think we can pop over to the next slide because I do want to get through all of our points before 4 o'clock. So this one is the Minnesota Lynx, which is the WNBA team, have been dominating the past few seasons, mostly because of Maya Moore's leadership. I believe this is when Laura asked to please step on her soapbox.
Yes. Anytime the WNBA is mentioned in a book, I am obviously going to talk about it. I really appreciated that this was in here when they were talking about basketball and like whether or not you're a real basketball fan, because I think the WNBA gets a lot of flack from casual basketball fans, but if you look at people who play the sport and NBA players, they all respect it a lot because it is a very good, entertaining product. But I also just wanted to talk about, since this is a book about basketball and kind of like social justice and discrimination, that basketball and the WNBA in particular have really been on like the forefront of fighting for social justice in sports.
Are you
And
sure it's not hockey?
I'm pretty sure it's not hockey. But Maya Moore in
I wonder what's
particular.
different between those things. I wonder what could possibly.
What could it be? What could it be? But Maya Moore in particular, who is a Black woman who was a top player in the WNBA, she stepped down at the height of her career because she wanted to like put her actions where her words were, and she wanted to really fight for Black individuals who are wrongfully imprisoned and prison reform in general. So like she left the game when she was at the height of her talent to give back and fight for that. So I just want to give a shout out to Maya Moore and the WNBA.
Beautiful. Yeah, I loved that. I loved that, you know, they were like gently ribbing Bijan because he knew so much about basketball. They were like, I bet you even knows like who's your favorite WNBA team. And he whipped it out. He was like, oh, actually,
Got
here's
it.
my hot takes on every single thing. And it was just like, yes. And everybody was very impressed by him still. I love him. Listen, I know you guys have mixed feelings about this book. I loved it. I was thriving.
I loved him as a character for sure.
Yes.
What?
I liked his character absolutely 100%.
Good.
Yes.
Correct, sir. I will kick you out of this book discussion. All right, we can hop over to the next slide. This is where, unfortunately, everyone let me add in my quotes about friendships. Let's talk about friendship. So this one is, so you're friends with Bergner, which is Stephanie. Drew asked, yeah, I said without hesitation. This is important because in this essay, I will. So at the beginning of the book, we see Stephanie arrive at this party, and most people are like, what is she doing here? Nobody's really her friend. And by the end of the book, she has this whole little group of friends, and nobody's embarrassed to be her friend. Nobody thinks, like, she's a very intense person. And she's aware of it. She, like, is very aware of her own, like fault. And you know, it was just really cute that Bijan was just like, yeah, I am her friend. And he doesn't hesitate anymore. He doesn't think about, like, what will that mean for his, like, social capital or what will that look like. He's just like, yeah, she's my friend. She stood by me through all of this. And I think he's so cute.
Yeah, like, even that scene when she showed up at the party, like, he kind of instinctively was like, oh, I invited her because everyone was, like, that weirded out that she was at this party. So, like, for him to, like, do it instinctively and then also to do it, like, when he's, like, thinking about how much she means to him, that was heartwarming. Absolutely. Friendship is magic.
And it wasn't a fair weather friendship either. Like, they got into it about some things. Like, he had that whole basic, like, call out of her when she talked to the newspaper about him without his permission. And, you know, there was a whole situation where, so Stephanie and her girlfriend are outed by a little demon boy named Noah. Listen, people I hate in this book: Will,
Noah,
Jessica, and Noah. Dumb.
Yeah.
And
and the coach.
Steve, wasn't he also on the basketball team? But he's friends with Will, and he was like a garbage boy. Whatever. He was mentioned like. Anyways, so it was just like it wasn't like their friendship was easy, but they actually really did draw strength from each other. And I like that at the end of the book, he doesn't even hesitate with this kid that he knows is more popular than him. He doesn't care. Like, he just doesn't care anymore. He wants to be true to his friends. Also, if you don't think I'm going to talk about Drew at some point in this, you're very wrong. I'm gonna. We can probably slide to the next slide. So the final basketball game, they're in the playoffs and they're playing this school called Mercer Day. And Will, who is aforementioned garbage person, has friends at Mercer Day who basically have been told to target Bijan, and they show up and they sit in the stands with like stereotypical Middle Eastern garb, and they like have fake beards, and they're holding up a photoshopped photo of Bijan as a terrorist on like a wanted poster, and they're chanting USA whenever he tries to take a free throw. And so Bijan basically says to coach at one point, who by the way, coach should have already been doing this, either they leave or I walk. And like, I'm not going to play until you get them all out of there. And so coach calls security over and they like get those kids out of there or whatever. And then
first he's like, do you need a break? Like, just take a break. Like, he wasn't even going to do like all of that.
He wasn't going to do anything. He was like, oh, do you want me to sub Will, the worst person ever, in for you? And Bijan was like, no, I want you to make those racists go away. And then, so I'm giving you the context for the quote. Sorry, we're gonna get to the quote, I promise. But then coach is like, all right, will you play now? Because they're gone. And Bijan goes, and so the whole book, coach has only called Bijan Kid or B. He doesn't say his full name. And Bijan looks him in the eye and he goes, say my name. Go ahead, say it. And so coach is like, kid, we don't have time for this. And here he comes, light of my life, Marcus. It's Bijan, coach, not kid, Marcus said. If he walks, I walk. Say his name, Drew said, looking down at the floor. Listen, the way my little Grinch heart grew 3 sizes when his team stood up for him. Laura looks dramatically unamused with how much I loved this moment.
No, I'm just thinking about how mad I am at coach. Refusing to call him Bijan and coming up with like nicknames that he's never said are okay, and calling him kid is like such like the number one microaggression. I feel like, and it's so disrespectful to shorten people's names, especially when they are names from outside your personal culture, without them telling you like, my name is this, but you can call me this. Like, you call them by their name. And also just, you can say so many trickier names that are Russian or German or whatever, but you can't learn how to pronounce this 2-syllable Middle Eastern name. Like, we all know where that's coming from. Just, if you don't know how to pronounce something, you ask, or you go on Google and YouTube and find a pronunciation guide. And this
guidance counselor,
that thing drives me crazy.
Said it right. The guidance counselor went out of her way to learn how to say his name before their meeting, so that when she was in the meeting, she was saying it correctly to him.
Oh, lovely. It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the whole book was like people. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
The whole book was just people calling him like Beej and like
without his permission.
Yeah. Oh, and when Noah did it. Sorry.
I hate that boy. He's the Matt of this book.
Oh, Matt, bringing it back.
Tying it all together. But I did like this moment, right, of Bijan basically being like, I have all the power here because you need me to play this basketball game more than I need to be playing this basketball game. And he told him to say his name, Marcus and Todd. I cut Todd's line out. Sorry, Todd. Todd also says it, homie. And then Drew stands up for Bijan for the first time to coach. And that's really significant because coach is so kind of like awful to Drew. And, you know, it was just really, it was the team finally rallying around him in a way that he deserved, that gave him so much power.
But it also stinks that besides Todd, it had to be the 2 other marginalized kids to be the ones to stand up for him, the black kid and the lower class kid.
Yeah, I mean...
But it is what it is.
It is what
They're
it is.
good
And
friends.
also, there is solidarity in that, you know, like
Yeah.
it does speak to the kind of solidarity that this book had built to this whole time as Bijan goes through this and the different ways that Marcus's and Drew's identity informed their perception of what happened. We can go ahead to the next slide because we are running out of time. Stephanie, Aaron, Elle, and Sean walked over trying to act as if they hadn't been loitering there, waiting for me to show up. More friendship. Loved it. 10 out of 10. Bijan starts with just having Sean as a friend. Now he's got all these friends. He's got so many friends. I love it. We can go to the last slide. I'm going to talk about Drew. But it'd be all right to room together because now Drew wants to room with Bijan at basketball camp, even though they started out hating each other. And they become good friends, and Drew gets his act together. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways, this book gave every character that deserved a redemption a meaningful redemption, and all of the villains were honestly a little bit caricatures. So I'm not even going to talk about Jessica because that was just like, okay, fine. But I do like that the characters that we wanted redemption for got redemption in meaningful ways and were committed to doing the work about it. My hot take.
Agreed.
I loved this book. I just had a good time. I wouldn't be like, oh, this is one of my favorite books, but like I had a good time. I would recommend this.
I think that, you know, if you like basketball, it's a quick read.
It is a quick read.
I will say the thing that like really turned me off from the book was like the interspersed like basketball announcer banter.
That was so bad. Yes, throughout the book,
I honestly just skipped all
Bijan
those.
imagines basketball announcers like narrating his life, and you can't skip over it because sometimes they're the ones telling you. It's like, oh, like Bijan's like dribbling to the hoop, and then the announcers come in, and the only way to find out if he made the basket is to read their stupid dialogue. I didn't like that. I will say, I didn't like that. Bijan was literally, he was the main character of the book, but he was also the main character in his brain. He was narrating his life for himself.
Yeah.
I guess respect. Yeah, but definitely I think of, you know, the books we've talked about on stream, it's definitely one of the ones I really enjoyed reading. I mean, it's no reverie, folks.
I agree with that.
All right, I think our next slide is our upcoming events slide. Great. So we're going to talk about a few upcoming events. This one I don't think is on the slide, but I'm going to plug it anyways. Tonight is our Mario Kart tournament, so if you're already pre-registered for that, be on the lookout for an email from Chris with instructions for how tonight is going to go. There is still space, I believe, on the wait list, or you can just send us an email at virtualteenroom@bpl.org. If you're interested in us hosting one of these again, please let us know, so that way we can do it. We can do it again. We can figure out a way to make it work. I will give fair warning to anyone who's watching this who is coming tonight. This is our first time trying it. Be nice to us. All right, Laura, would you like to talk about our next upcoming
Sure. On June 8th at this same 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. time slot, we are hosting Improv Boston on our channel to do a Twitch improv show for teens. So if you are a teen, you can come and join us for that. And your suggestions that you drop in the chat, they will use to create their show for you. So it's basically like just a free improv show for you guys to get some pre-finals entertainment. So
and I think I
come on by.
volunteered myself to embarrass myself for that. So come by for that too, I guess. Our next on June 10th, we'll be having another book discussion. This is another book discussion as part of our year-long reading challenge, which you can join in at any time. You don't have to just join, and you don't have to read the books that we read. You can read any book that fits the theme for any of the months, and you will get credit for it. It is the easiest challenge you'll ever win, even though you don't win anything. It's the joy of reading, folks. But we will be hosting some more librarians on stream for Elizabeth Acevedo's novel in verse, The Poet X. So be sure to check that out 3 to 4 here on our Twitch channel on Thursday, June 10th.
Maybe get some intel on one of your summer reading books.
True, that's one of your summer reading books, so you might as well come because you have to read it anyways. Laura, and I think you have another event.
Yes, so then another event, which is going to be on Zoom, I believe. So you do have to register. On June 24th, we are hosting some people from the Gifford Cat Shelter and the Canine Last Hope Rescue to come and talk to teens about how you can get involved in animal rescue and animal care in your community, but also to talk about, you know, things are starting to open up again. People are going back to work and school and camp and whatnot. So they're going to talk about how you can help your family pets to adjust to not having people with them all the time anymore and avoiding those behavioral issues. So
I will be attending for that reason. My cats are going to throw a fit.
And we will have cats and dogs present on the stream. So it's worth it for that alone.
Sold. 100. We'll be there. All right. And I think that's the last of our upcoming events. All right. So I think that's it. So we hope to see you tonight at Mario Kart. And if we don't see you then, hopefully we'll see you next Tuesday at our gaming stream, which is something. I'm on vacation, so I didn't bother to memorize the schedule. Sorry. We're playing a game on stream, so we'll hope to see you then. And Wednesday is Jackbox. And we'll keep you posted as to our June programming schedule, which is going to be a little bit lighter. So if there's something you want to see, make sure you send us an email to that virtual teen room at bpl.org. So we're bringing you content that you really want to see. And that's it for us. We're the Boston Public Library Teen Services Twitch stream with our book discussion. I'm Allie.
Laura.
Becky.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I can't fight, I can't breathe without my brother. We come from peace, we can't be beating on each other. I need peace, love from my hood. I put my part, have faith in my hood. We only relate to the same things. How can we focus and maintain when we point our fingers and place blame? We point our fingers and place blame. Society's just trying to bring us down, rob us of culture and shut us down. We fight for a change and let's get it now. Win it now, present it now. Tell me what's next. Tell me what's new. I'll break it down. It's up to you. Corrupted the kings, we are still breaking every chain. Facing the pain, losing brothers on the day-to-day. But this gotta change, break the locks of the cage. We will not suffer. I can't fight, I can't breathe without my brother. We come from peace, we can't be beating on each other. Hatred, look at all the time being wasted. Our skin is sensation, build love all around the nation. He is just patient, even faith, love, and relations. Distance is the only thing that can break us. Won't settle for less, we're being held in the press, making our way to the crest. It's time to invest into each other for unity, building a better community. These are the colors that's true to me. This isn't new to me. I need my sisters and I need my mothers. And I can't fight, I can't breathe without my brother. We come from peace, we can't be beating on each other.